I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, just quickly remember the contents that we are going to do. Properties of thermal radiation, which we discussed. Black body radiation, we discussed. We also discussed pure temperature dependence, and we discussed Kirchhoff's law. I will recap all these four quickly for you, don't worry. And then we are to move on to Stefan Boltzmann law, Wien's displacement law, Wien's distribution law, Rayleigh-Jean's law in ultraviolet catastrophe. In fact, I don't think we will move on to number 5 now today. We'll quickly recap up to 4, and there is something very important that we need to discuss before we move on to Stefan Boltzmann law. Okay. All right, so we saw that there were 3 modes of heat transfer, as we know: conduction, convection, and radiation, out of which conduction and convection is done through material medium, but radiation does not require a material medium. Okay, and this radiation is what we are going to, this is basically our topic of interest, the mode of heat transfer where material medium is not required. All right, so energy that is radiated by a hot body is called radiated energy. We know it is electromagnetic in nature. It is part of the electromagnetic spectrum. If you remember the electromagnetic spectrum that we discussed while doing, in our very first class of physical optics in way back in SEM 2, if you remember, recall at all, then remember I told you that the light that we see, visible light, only forms a very small part of the spectrum, but all the characteristics of light in its wave nature that we had discussed are also followed equally by the entire electromagnetic spectrum, which spreads from about a few nanometers to about hundreds of kilometers, communication waves which are very, very long. So the infrared part is actually that is forming the thermal radiation. Okay, so it is electromagnetic in nature, and therefore it will follow all the properties of electromagnetic waves. It is beyond the red end of the visible range, as I just told you, typically in the infrared region. Okay. Now, thermal radiation, as the name suggests, is the radiation emitted by a body by virtue of its temperature. And the transfer of heat from a hot body to a cold body will happen without interfering with the medium. So when heat is transferred from a hot body to a cold body, there is some medium in between. If you are sitting near a fire, then there is air between you and the fire, but the air between you and the fire will not get heated up. The temperature of the air will not rise appreciably. Okay, so there is not much intervening of the medium. The heat gets transferred from the body at the higher temperature to the body at the lower temperature. So basically, as we discussed in our last class, each and every object that consists of a certain environment. For example, if you are sitting in a room, then your laptop, the walls of the room, the fan, the light, each object is at a different temperature. Okay, and each object is either absorbing heat or radiating heat. Now, there are objects in the room, in your room, which are at a temperature lower than your body temperature, while there are objects in the room which are at a temperature higher than your body temperature. All right, so you will be absorbing heat from the bodies that are at a you will be absorbing heat from the bodies that are at a higher temperature, and you will be releasing heat which will go to the bodies which are at a lower temperature. So there will be a net amount of heat either flowing into your body or flowing out of your body, depending on the sum of the heat radiated and absorbed. I hope I'm clear. Okay, so it is basically the algebraic sum for a given object, whether the net heat is being absorbed by the body or emanated by it. All right, but remember that all bodies are radiating or absorbing heat simultaneously. But suppose I am sitting, suppose it's been raining for 3 days straight away now, and we are feeling a little cold. Why? Because the atmosphere is at a temperature that is lower than our body temperature. So does that mean that each and every object that are there in my room are at a temperature lower than my body temperature, so that I am always radiating heat and feeling cold? No, there might be bodies which are at a higher temperature. For example, the laptop, it gets heated up. My laptop is old now and it gets heated up. The mobile phone, when I keep it on charge, it gets heated up. I have a cup of hot tea beside me right now, which is of course hotter, very hot. It's piping hot. I just in fact, I wanted 5 minutes from you to bring my cup of tea. So that is at a higher temperature. So those bodies are in fact radiating heat to me. But when you take the sum, the algebraic sum, the net amount of heat that is moving into my body is obviously lesser than the net amount of heat that is moving out of my body, because in general the air outside is cooler, which is why I am feeling a little cold. Okay, so I hope this part is clear to you, how the feeling of hotness or coldness is related, and that the fact that this thermal radiation is entirely due to temperature. And this was in fact given by Maxwell, and this is what I told you: all bodies emit radiation to their surroundings and absorb radiation from their surroundings. So what are the properties of thermal radiation? Just go through. Okay, you already know these. So I've just pointed them out. The properties are similar to the properties of electromagnetic waves. And then we went through some definitions. I will not repeat the definitions today. We saw what was the total energy density, and then we saw what was the spectral energy density, and I told you that the spectral energy density is related to a certain range of wavelength, per unit range of wavelength, whereas the total energy density denotes to energy coming from all wavelengths from a given source. Similarly, total emissive power or emissivity of a source, and spectral emissive power, again per unit wavelength. And obviously, therefore, total energy density U is integration 0 to infinity U lambda d lambda, that is for all available wavelengths. And similarly, total emissive power or emissivity epsilon is integration 0 to infinity E lambda d lambda, that is for all available wavelengths. Then we defined absorptivity or absorptive power, which is related to wavelength. It is for a given unit wavelength range. And relative emittance. Okay. And then we discussed what is Prevost's theory of heat exchanges. Once again, this is something you already know. Only perhaps you did not know that this was technically called the Prevost theory of heat exchanges. Okay. This is what I told you, I mean, so long, whatever I told you, that continuously radiation is emitted from a body to the surroundings, and the rate of emission depends on the nature of the surface and the temperature, as well as the radiation that it receives from the surroundings is again at a rate that depends on the surface and temperature of the surroundings. Okay. Then we went on to the topic of black bodies. We know, all of you know what a black body is. It is something that absorbs all the radiation that is incident on it, and when left alone, it will emit all the radiation that is that it has absorbed. Okay. So basically, black bodies are of particular interest because these are hot bodies that emit thermal spectra of universal character. So no matter what kind of material the black bodies are made up of, if you take a few of them, say if you take 3 black bodies, all 3 made up of different materials, but if you have heated them to a certain temperature, then you will see that the spectral analysis of the radiation that is emitted by the three black bodies show the same characteristics. Okay, this universal nature leads us to study black body in some detail. So this is the definition of a perfectly black body. It absorbs entirely all the radiations of any wavelength that is incident upon. So it neither deflects nor transmits any radiation, and therefore it appears black irrespective of the wavelength of the incident radiation. This is the reason why it is called a black body. When heated to a temperature, the entire or total radiation is emitted. And it is a perfect absorber, therefore it is a perfect radiator. So emission from a perfectly black body is the greatest possible for any wavelength at any temperature. No other body will be able to radiate more than a perfectly black body at that temperature. Okay, so at that temperature, this phrase is very, very important. So this is entirely temperature specific. So why are we interested in black bodies? As I told you, because of the universal characteristics. Okay. And this universal nature of the radiation emitted by a black body led physicists to analyze and explain why these specific features were unique for a black body, in fact for all black bodies. So in nature we know that a perfectly black body is impossible to obtain, and I showed you the usual laboratory method of constructing a black body using any material. So this is how it is constructed. So basically, when this kind of a hole, or cavity, rather cavity is the correct word. This is also known as cavity radiation, in fact. So when this kind of a cavity is formed, and there is only one way in which so this kind of radiation, this is entering through this small hole, and then it gets absorbed because it's entirely, just a second. Okay, can you hear me now? Am I audible? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes,
sorry for
ma'am.
the disturbance. So So this radiation is entering the chamber and it is getting continuously reflected from the walls of this cavity. Okay, and because of this conical projection, there is no way that it can go, this conical projection ensures that it gets reflected and moves to the opposite wall, or it stays within the cavity. So this is a construction that makes all the incident radiation to enter the cavity and stay inside it. Okay, so this is the closest approximation to a black body. All right, and then so this is a black body absorber, and then when you uh, heat it to a certain temperature by making radiation of a certain wavelength incident on it, and then when that particular temperature is reached, you cut off the radiation. So what happens is it starts radiating. So all the incident radiation that it has absorbed will now be emitted by the radiation. So the emitted radiation will consist of all the wavelengths that it has absorbed solar. So this is the black body radiator. Okay, and then we saw why a black body radiation is purely dependent on temperature, right? So in general, the nature of radiation and the amount of radiation, that is the quality or the quantity of the radiation, it depends on temperature as well as the nature of the surface. This is for any general surface. And if you have a non-conducting cavity which is maintained at a constant temperature, then the quality and quantity of radiation entirely, that is inside it, is entirely independent of the material of the walls as well as any other objects that may be present inside the enclosure. Okay, so basically this is called a uniform temperature or isothermal enclosure. And when you place a black body inside the isothermal enclosure, when it is in equilibrium with the enclosure, it will emit the entire radiation of the enclosure. Okay, so this radiation is independent of the nature of the walls of the enclosure or any other objects present within it. And since the perfectly black body absorbs all the radiation that falls upon it of all wavelengths, so the radiation emitted by the black body will possess a character which is totally independent of the nature of the particular object. It will depend only on the temperature to which it has been raised. So black body radiation is purely temperature dependent, which makes it universal. Okay, and that gives us Kirchhoff's law, which says that the ratio of the emissive power to absorptive power is the same for all bodies. Okay, and it is equal to the emissive power of a perfectly black body at that temperature. And we proved, so let's not spend time today again by proving Kirchhoff's law once more, unless you want me to repeat it once more. Because in my last class I had given you the proof of Kirchhoff's law. So if you have any questions, then you can ask. Otherwise, I'll just move on to the next part. This is Kirchhoff's law, that was the proof. Now, before moving on to the next part, so after Kirchhoff's law, there is Stefan Boltzmann's law. But before moving on to Stefan Boltzmann's law, what we need to discuss and understand is something known as radiation pressure. Okay? So what is radiation pressure? First of all, we will consider two cases for discussing radiation pressure and finding out the value of radiation pressure. First, we'll consider normal incidence and then we'll consider oblique incidence. Okay. Now, if you take recourse to quantum theory, then let us consider a photon of frequency mu. Okay. Basic quantum theory. We know that the energy of a photon of frequency mu is given by h nu. All right. Now suppose this energy of the photon, if it corresponds to a mass m, then the energy is equal to mc square, and therefore we can write mc square equal to h nu, just by analogy. Okay, we know. Now don't tell me, ma'am, photon is massless, why are you writing this? This is just to draw an analogy that mc square, if m is the mass, then its energy is mc square, and if we are considering a photon of frequency nu, then its energy is h nu, so we are equating mc square to h nu, so that we can write the mass as h nu by c square. Okay, the momentum equal to mass into velocity, but velocity of photon is c, so the momentum we can write as h nu by c square into c, which gives us h nu by c, which we write as E by C. This small e corresponds to the energy of a single photon. Okay, so the momentum of a single photon is just E by C. Okay, so this is normal incidence. The radiation is incident from left to right, and all the rays are parallel to each other, and it is normally incident on a given surface. So AB is the surface and the radiation is incident normally on AB. Please stop me and ask me a question if you have any doubt anywhere. Okay. So for a beam of such photons which is incident normally on the surface AB, the total momentum will be summation E by C. Single momentum of a single photon is E by C. So the total momentum will be summation E by C. C is a constant, so the total momentum will be summation E by C, which again we know that each photon has the same energy h nu. So the momentum will be capital E by C, where capital E is the sum of the energy of all the photons that are present in such a beam that is incident normally on the surface AB. Okay. Now let us suppose that energy passing per unit volume, that is energy density, is small u. We had already defined this. Energy density is small u. If the area of this surface AB is S, okay, now you have to visualize a little. I have drawn the lateral segment. Basically this is a slab like this, a surface. Okay, and let us suppose that the surface area of AB is S. So the energy passing through S per second is U into C into S. Okay, energy passing per unit volume is U. So energy passing through the total area S is US, and per second is U into C into S, where C is the velocity. So energy passing through AB per unit area per unit time is UC. But this is equal to E, the total energy. Okay, we denote this as E. So P, the momentum, can be written as, it is E by C. So in place of E, we can write UC. So UC by C, which is equal to U. So the momentum is given by U, the energy density. So rate of change of moment, this is the rate of change of momentum per unit area, and this is the pressure of radiation. So basically you can say that when radiation is incident on a surface, why are we talking about pressure? We are talking about pressure because basically photons are incident and photons possess a certain momentum, and in this way if you calculate the rate of change of momentum of the photons that are incident normally on the surface, we get a certain value of the momentum which comes out to be the same as the energy density U. Therefore, this is the pressure of radiation when we are considering normal incidence. Okay. So pressure of radiation is equal to energy density. This was given by Maxwell again. Next, we will consider oblique incidence or diffused radiation. Okay. The earlier slide was normal incidence. So the rays are incident normally on the surface AB. Next we'll consider oblique incidence. So we consider the incident beam to be making an angle theta with the normal to the surface AB. Alright, so this is my surface AB, same surface AB, only now the rays are no longer incident perpendicular to the surface, they are incident making an angle theta with the normal to the surface. Okay, so if this is the normal, this dashed line, if this is the normal, then the rays are making an angle theta with the normal. Okay, and we draw another surface A prime B so that the angle between A prime B and AB is also theta. I hope that is clear to everybody. So the energy incident on the surface A prime B per unit area per unit time. So basically this radiation, it is normal to the surface A prime B but oblique for the surface AB. So we have already calculated the normal radiation pressure. So the radiation pressure on the surface A prime B will be UC, not the radiation pressure but the energy per unit area per unit time. Radiation pressure will be U, but energy incident per unit area per unit time is UC. So the total energy incident on A prime B, which is also of area S, per unit time is UC into S. Per unit area is UC. So total radiation on the entire surface is energy per unit area multiplied by the surface area. So UC into S. Okay. But from the figure you can see that A prime B is equal to AB cos theta equal to S prime cos theta, where S prime is the area of AB. Okay. So in place of S, we write UC into S prime cos theta. Okay. So UCS can also be written as UC into S prime cos theta. And this energy is also incident on AB. The same beam basically will cross over A prime B and be incident on AB, only it will be oblique instead of normal. But the energy is the same. The energy that is incident on A prime B is also incident on AB, and the value is given by UC into S prime cos theta. So the energy incident on AB, now the surface AB, just a second. Hello? না কে বলছেন? ও আচ্ছা, হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, আমার না একটা ক্লাস চলছে, আমি একটু তোকে হাফ অ্যান আওয়ার পরে ফোন করি। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে। Sorry about that. Okay. So the energy incident on AB per unit area per unit time is, we have to divide it by the surface area. So it becomes UC cos theta. All right. So the momentum will be E by C. Now E in this case is UC cos theta. So that divided by C. So the momentum is now U cos theta. So whatever we got in the normal case, here in the oblique case, it is just the cosine component. So momentum is U cos theta. So the component of the momentum along the normal to AB is UC cos theta into cos theta. So it will be U cos squared theta. Okay. This is the component of the momentum along the normal to AB given by U cos squared theta. So the pressure of radiation on a surface for normal incidence is U cos squared theta. All right. Now, as we are considering diffuse radiation, so radiation can be incident from all directions with equal probability. Out of that, we have considered one direction in which the radiation makes an angle theta with the normal to the surface. But the value of theta can be anything. when we are considering oblique incidence, there can be any angle that the incident beam can make with the normal to the surface, because we are considering oblique radiation, oblique incidence. Okay, so we have to consider rays incident from all possible directions, because all the directions have equal probability. So basically, if you consider n beams of radiations to be incident on the surface, then the total pressure of radiation will be given by summation u cos square theta. This is just for a single angle theta, but if you have to consider with equal probability all such angles, then you have to sum over this term, and then for n such beams of radiation, the total pressure will be given by summation of u cos square theta. So now we have to basically calculate this summation u cos square theta. Okay. Now for this, we consider a hemisphere of radius r and centered at O on AB. This AB is our same surface. This AB is basically the surface that we have been considering, on which the ray is incident obliquely, and now we are trying to calculate the total pressure when this oblique incidence is arbitrary, that is considering with equal probability all such oblique incidences. Okay, so this AB is the surface, and we draw an imaginary hemisphere of radius r. Now what we do is we consider slicing a ring out of this hemisphere with the top surface EF and the bottom surface CD. Okay. How do we obtain the surfaces EF and CD? By sweeping out cones of semi-vertical angles theta and theta plus d theta. Okay. So this bottom surface is obtained by sweeping out a cone of semi-vertical angle theta, and the top surface is obtained by sweeping out a cone of semi-vertical angle theta plus d theta. Okay, and then we will get a slice, a ring out of this hemisphere called EFDC or FECD, whatever. Okay, I hope you can understand, you can visualize this. These curved lines, these blue colored curved lines actually show you the ringed surface, the surface that I'm talking about, the slice of ring that I'm talking about, that we're trying to cut from this hemisphere. Okay. Now, area, what is the area of this slice of this ring? It is 2 pi r sine theta into r d theta, right? The area means the surface area of this ring. I hope you have, I'm sure you have done this kind of problem in your electrostatics classes. So the area of this ring is 2 pi r sine theta into r d theta. This is r d theta. Okay. This curved surface is r d theta. So 2 pi r sine theta into r d theta. Now total area of the hemisphere is 2 pi r square, half of area of the sphere. Area of the sphere is 4 pi r square, so area of the hemisphere is 2 pi r square. If n beams are uniformly distributed over this hemisphere, then the number of beams crossing through the area of the ring, total number of beams that are incident on this surface distributed over this hemisphere is n. So how many rings will cross the area of the ring? Let us denote it by dn, and dn will be given by this area 2 pi r square sine theta d theta divided by the total area of the hemisphere into n, simple unitary method. Okay, 2 pi r square sine theta d theta is the area, n is the number of beams passing through the entire hemisphere. So one beam will pass through n by 2 pi r square. So through the area 2 pi r square sine theta d theta, the number of beams that will pass is given by this 2 pi r square sine theta d theta divided by 2 pi r square into n. So the number comes out to be n sine theta d theta. So the fraction of beams incident between theta and theta plus d theta, that is just between these two surfaces, that is within this slice of ring, is given by dn by n, and that from this expression you can see is sine theta d theta. So the pressure due to these beams is dP given by dn by n into u cos square theta. Remember, the total pressure is u cos square theta. So pressure due to this fraction is dn by n into u cos square theta. Dn by n is sine theta d theta. So this is u cos square theta into sine theta d theta. So dP is u cos square theta into sine theta. So the total pressure due to all such rings or slices, this is due to just one such slice between theta and theta plus d theta. But the total hemisphere consists of several such slices. We can think of breaking up the hemisphere into several such rings. So basically, what do we need to do to find the total pressure? Integrate. Okay. Integrate for theta equal to 0 to theta equal to 90. Again, look at the picture. Theta, the minimum value of theta is 0 for coincidence with OB, and the maximum value of theta is 90 along this radius. Okay. So we have to integrate for theta equal to 0 to theta equal to 90. So the total pressure is given by integration 0 to pi by 2 u cos square theta sine theta d theta. Okay, and I've done the integration for you. Cos theta equal to x, let cos theta equal to x. So minus sine theta d theta equal to dx. So the pressure you can now integrate as u integration 1 to 0 x square into minus dx. So the value comes out to be u by 3 after doing the integration. Okay, so pressure of diffused or obliquely incident radiation is 1/3 of the total energy density. So we saw that pressure of normal incident radiation is just same as energy density, but pressure for oblique incidence of radiation on a surface is 1/3 of the energy density. Okay, you have to keep in mind these two values, that for normal incidence, pressure of radiation is same as energy density U, but for oblique incidence, pressure of radiation on the surface is equal to 1/3 of the total energy density U. And this is the derivation. This derivation is, it might come, okay? And therefore you must know the steps in between. Now, this kind of a figure where you know the hemisphere and how the slice is made, this might not be available in any particular book. So if you, just try to go through the slides and see whether you have understood how this derivation was done. Okay, because at least I have gone through a few books and I have not found this particular kind of step-by-step explanation of how to calculate the value in any particular book. I have got this from my, my to-go book is Iceberg and Resnick. So I found this derivation in Iceberg and Resnick. I don't think Gupta and Roy contains this derivation. Okay. So just keep in mind that for oblique incidence it's u by 3, whereas for normal incidence it's u. We have some more time, so we will just complete. Yes.
Hello. ম্যাম আগের স্লাইডে যেখানে সামেশন ইউ cos স্কয়ার থিটা ছিল ওই স্লাইডটা একবার দেখাবেন?
এটা
এর আগেরটা।
এটা
হ্যাঁ ম্যাম।
হ্যাঁ।
ও আচ্ছা, ইউ cos স্কয়ার থিটাটা কোত্থেকে এসেছে ওটা দেখবার জন্য। ঠিক আছে ম্যাম, দুটো গুণ করে। ঠিক আছে।
Okay, so we have some time. তাহলে স্টিফান বোলসম্যান লটা করেই নি। This you have all you all know about Stefan's law. It's a very well-known law that temperature is the heat radiated is proportional to the fourth power of temperature. So it was partly given by Stefan and then added on by Boltzmann, which is why there are 2 years given, 1879 and 1884. So the final form was obtained in 1884. Someone is unmuted. Can you please mute yourself? Can you mute yourself, please? Okay, thank you. So Stefan's law, what is Stefan's law? Stefan's law says that the rate of emission of radiant energy per unit area of a perfectly black body is directly proportional to the fourth power of its absolute temperature. All of you know this, okay? Rate of emission of radiant energy per unit area of a perfectly black body is proportional to the fourth power of the absolute temperature. That is E proportional to T to the power 4 or E equal to sigma T to the power 4, where sigma is the constant of proportionality and its value is well known. It's a universal constant given by 5.57 into 10 to the power minus 8 watt per meter square per Kelvin to the power 4. And this value is known as Stefan's constant. In fact, I think some of you have done this experiment in the laboratory also when we opened, right? So this is one of the easiest experiment that is there in your practical syllabus, but a very, very important one because sigma, Stefan's constant, is one of the most important universal constants. Okay. Now, this refers to only emission by the hot body by virtue of its temperature and nothing else. All right. And it is not related to the net loss or gain of heat by a body after exchange with the surroundings. It refers only to the emission by a hot body. So this is, not taking into account Prevost's theory of heat exchanges. The thing that I discussed in my last class and also in the beginning of this class, that when there are several objects around you, suppose we have an enclosure where there are several objects and there will be exchange of heat between all the objects, and if you consider any one of the objects, then the net amount of heat that it is radiating or absorbing depends on the summation of the heat exchange with it by all the objects in its surroundings. Okay, but Stefan's law is not considering all this. It is not considering the net loss or gain. That is, it is irrespective of the exchange of heat. It is just talking about the emission of the hot body because of its temperature. So when we are writing Stefan's law, we have to forget about all the other bodies that are present in its vicinity. We are thinking only about that body which is raised to a temperature T and then it is emitting, and the emission is proportional to the fourth power of the temperature. Okay, so this statement is very, very important. I mean, you have to have this concept. Why? What is Stefan's law alone? How is it different from Stefan-Boltzmann law? What is Stefan-Boltzmann law? So Boltzmann added the concept of exchange. Okay, and you can see that it is 5 years later that the final form of the law came into being. So Boltzmann and Stefan's law taken together, that takes into account the exchange of heat with the surroundings. So if you consider the absolute temperature of the black body to be T and the absolute temperature of the black bodies of another body, another black body that is at its vicinity as T0, the net rate of loss of heat energy per unit area of the surface is given by E proportional to T to the power 4 minus T0 to the power 4. So we are considering another body in its vicinity. This may be several bodies taken together or just a single body. And therefore, E equal to sigma T to the power 4 minus T0 to the power 4, where sigma is the same Stefan's constant. Okay. So this is in accordance with Prevost theory of heat exchange. So just remember, you must have this concept very clear. In fact, this concept was not very clear to me before I started making this note. I was not very clear of the difference between Stefan's law and Stefan Boltzmann's law, because in general, we talk about Stefan Boltzmann's law, and it is E is proportional to T to the power 4 minus T0 to the power 4, where T is the temperature of the black body and T0 is the temperature of the surrounding. We talk about it in that manner. But while making your notes, while preparing your notes, this particular topic last semester, I found out this difference, and I thought it is important for you as well as me, of course, to know this difference, how conceptually this is different. And I also therefore went through the history a little bit to find out that the Stefan's law was proposed in 1879, where he did not consider Prevost theory of exchanges, but to give it a more generalized form, Boltzmann added to it, considering Prevost theory of exchanges, considering there are other bodies in the vicinity, and he gave this final form. So for a body which is not perfectly black, this is for a perfectly black body. Now all bodies, we know that most bodies are not perfectly black, and it has a relative emittance E, so that Stefan's Boltzmann's law is further modified as E equal to capital E equal to small e sigma T to the power 4 minus T naught to the power 4, where small e is the value of relative emittance. Its value is 1 for a perfectly black body, and for all other normal bodies which are not perfectly black, the value of small e is less than 1. It is a fraction. Okay. So we'll do till here today, and in Friday's class, we'll do the thermodynamical proof of Stefan's law. You have probably come across Stefan's law before, but you have not done the proof, and for proving Stefan's law, we will take course of thermodynamics that you have done in your earlier semester. Okay? So very little has been done in today's class, but whatever has been done is of very high importance. So please go through the derivation part of pressure of radiation. Try to understand why we are talking about pressure for radiation. And then, of course, this Stefan's law that I explained just now. So with that, I'll end